Another wild one at PayPal Park, and not in a good way. The Quakes fell 5-3 to Sporting Kansas City, conceding 3 goals in the opening 25 minutes before clawing 2 back and making it a match, only to then fall apart again in the second half. It was chaotic, exhausting, and honestly pretty tough to watch at times. But like any recent Quakes game, the scoreline doesn't really paint the full picture, so let's unpack this. My name's Kevin, I'm joined by Luis, and together we're the Quakesaholics. Luis, get us started with the first words that come to mind when reflecting on this game.
Probably embarrassing, humiliating, and unfortunate, I would say. Didn't have to be this way, didn't have to end this way, but unfortunately it did.
We got that ounce of hope just before halftime, and then the gallon of disappointment in the second half. It seems pretty clear from fan reactions online, different comments, Reddit, Instagram, X, whatever, basically any social media platform. You'll see people saying this game and the last LAFC game was on Earl Edwards, the backup goalkeeper that's been stepping in while Daniel's been out with a concussion. And you look at the stats: 5 shots, all 5 went in, and so it feels pretty natural to blame the keeper for this. Do think that there's a lot that he could have done, but I don't think that this game is entirely on him. So I was thinking, let's just go through the goals. Let's break these goals down and kind of give more context to all this. So, okay, starting out the first goal, this play starts in our third of the field. Espinosa recovers the ball. He's trying to find a pass because there's just a lot of traffic. He tries to pass to Niko. That ball basically just gets gifted to Kansas City. They catch the Quakes really flat-footed defending. They get a bunch of passes. They get a pass through Leroux and K, and then quick 1-2 back to Jovic. He runs it in. Pretty simply passes it. I think it was actually through Rodriguez's legs. But anyways, whether it was through him, around him, the point is that they got the ball really quickly to their left wing. They had a ton of space. They run in, they shoot, and the ball goes in. This is probably the first goal that really set the tone for the match, that Kansas City was just going to exploit a lot of our defensive mistakes. And watching it from the stands, it really felt like Earl Edwards Jr. should have done more. And in the replay, you do see him get his wrist on the ball. But then watching back, you watch the 2 minutes that led up to this goal. Costa gives away a ball trying to get it out of our third. Espinosa gave away 2 balls, and this was actually like I said, again, this started with Espinosa giving the ball away. So it kind of set the tone of there's just a lot of defensive mistakes, and it's, yes, Earl Edwards Jr. should have done more, but this is a total team failure.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's definitely one of those goals that just looks ugly when you see it for the first time, but I think when you look at it a bit deeper, it is just a more of a team letdown overall. I think anytime you see a really acute angle like that, you expect the goalie to make a save, and when he doesn't, he's always going to have questions marked about him, especially after the performance against LAFC. I think, Espinoza, obviously he gave the ball away, and the player that ends up scoring, arguably, he should have been the one that was tracking him. And also, it wouldn't be the last time that we see a winger kind of being forced to play in that fullback position later on in the match. That would give away a golden opportunity for someone on the flank for Kansas City. And yeah, it's unfortunate. It looks bad. I think the XG on target was 0.11 for that shot. So, you know, 1 out of every 10 times essentially that goes in, and it was this time where that goes in. I do think Edwards should have done better, but you're right. It just opens up the floodgates from there, and yeah.
Talk about floodgates. It was what, like a minute, maybe 2 minutes later, we see the next Kansas City goal. This one starts off even more disappointingly because the free kick coming from the goalkeeper, and they just sent a deep, deep over the top through ball. And you see in this first picture, Rodriguez is in the top right. There's actually a player behind him that doesn't get called offsides. I think he was enabled by Romney, who's towards the bottom there. And then the ball goes over. Rodriguez he has his back to the player. And then that just goes over. Rodriguez can't get a head on it. He doesn't get a foot on it. He doesn't really make a challenge. And it was kind of not what we're used to seeing from Rodriguez. I mean, he's been one of our most consistent players for the past, 2-3 years, for how long he's been here. And he played a phenomenal game against LAFC. And then in this game, especially on this goal, he just did not paint himself in pretty colors. And then you can see that it eventually turned into what was almost like a one-on-one with the keeper. And obviously it was great control from Kansas City's goal scorer. And it was controlled it with 1 foot, scored with the other, something like that. It was really quick, really unfortunate on this one.
Yeah, you're right. It is kind of weird to see Rodriguez just not contest a ball like that. He had so much time to see it come over his head, and for it to just go right into Kansas City player and just have them. It was a great control on their behalf, I will say. But I think Rodriguez has to do better there, right? Make it difficult for him, get in his way, do something. It's just really easy for the Kansas player in that situation. And he does have good control again and a good finish, I will say. Could Edwards have done better there? Maybe. Would Danielle have done better there? Maybe, possibly. But at the end of the day, it is a chance right in front of goal, and it just looks bad.
Yeah, and while those first two goals, I definitely think you can point a little bit to Earl Edwards Jr. as having a little bit of fault there. I think the third goal is really the first time we see that is like, yeah, this is a completely defensive failure from the Earthquakes. So we start off, Kansas is running down their right-hand side. Romney's actually there with the one-on-one. He's covering that player. He signals to Costa and Cade for some more backup, and they start running into the same space. It was really strange. They almost bumped into each other, and eventually Kay extends his arm, tells Costa, hey, go help Romney. I'm going to go cover. Checks his shoulder, sees that Kansas City has a player running right down the middle of the field, completely uncontested. And you see Muni kind of looking over that way too. I'm now wondering, was Muni just waiting there because he wasn't sure if Rodriguez was going to make it to his player on time? And so he's kind of in that gray zone. Should I stay with my man? Should I go to the next one? In either case, Kay and Muni, neither of them make it. The pass gets through. Kansas City has another clear shot on goal. And just like that, it's 3-0 down, and it wasn't even like 25 minutes at this point.
Yeah, you see Silimanov just being one-on-one with Romney, and he asked for help. And I think Mark Anthony Kay was, like you said, it was kind of weird, right? They're both running in the same direction. And it seemed to me like Romney was asking for help. Mark Anthony Kay was trying to direct Costa to go provide that help. Silimanov was a player the first time we played KC who did give us some trouble. He was a player that we highlighted that was, cutting inside, creating danger. So it makes sense, right? You don't want to just be one-on-one, a center back being pulled that far out wide. But at the same time, Mark Anthony has to do his job. From the replay, honestly, it looked like the guy making the run into the box. It's as if he just had like a full 40 yards where he just ran straight toward goal with no one in front of him. And it just looked awful. And yeah, there are question marks about what Muni's doing. He could have covered the space as well. Personally, I think that the more likely thing is that he maybe was just very worried about Joveljic. Of course, Joveljic has been a danger man for Kansas City so far this season. They've had some turnaround. For whatever reason, Mark Anthony Kay doesn't follow his man. Muni doesn't cover that space, and it's an easy goal that Edwards can do nothing about.
Yeah, and so to recap, Romney has some fault because he lets the pass gets through. Muni and Kay aren't in position, and then Costa also didn't get there in time to support Romney. And so you have four players right there that are also at fault. And I think this is when you really start seeing the picture of like Earl Edwards Jr., yes, he is a downgrade to Daniel. There's no question about that. But I think this defense and all of these mistakes are kind of like a magnifying glass on his weaknesses as a goalie. And I think we're just so used to Daniel stepping up in those moments and really overperforming that it just makes this feel like such a downgrade. But yeah, what can you do? The good thing is that after that, the Quakes did pull two back. Like we mentioned, we go into halftime. The crowd was really electric. It felt like we can really do a comeback. But then things just fell apart on the fourth goal. So this fourth goal, the play is starting to build up on the Kansas City right side again. I mean, it's a theme that they just build down the wings, right? We've seen this in a lot of these goals now. Rodriguez is in the left side, and he has a man behind him. I noticed that a lot of times he just had his back turned to the player. In any case, ball goes out to the right. Then as that play is progressing, that number 10 from Kansas City starts making a run deep. And Rodriguez then checks his shoulder and sees that his player is missing. Where is that player? Like a good 3-4 yards ahead of him, already running at goal. And again, you see Romney paired up. You see Muni paired up with Joveljic. They are busy with their man. They cannot transition over to cover for Rodriguez. Like, there's just no one else there. And maybe you can argue where was the wing back. But at that point, like, because it started with Rodriguez paired with their number 10, that is his responsibility. There's no question about that. The play continues to develop. They get a cross in. You can again argue, why didn't Romney stop that ball like we saw in the third goal? Muni didn't overextend. I think it was correct to not jump at the goal because, he does a slide tackle that can result in an own goal, and then it's a whole different story. And anyways, he's with Joveljic. He's fulfilling his duties. And then the player that was supposed to be Rodriguez, he's basically right in front of goal. The whole left side of the goal is open. Edwards throws himself at that side because he's probably guessing, yeah, they're going to go for the wider side. And it's unfortunate that they went for the near post there. 4-2. Basically, all of the momentum that the Quakes have been building up in that first half of the second half is gone. And you could really feel that in the stadium.
Yeah, I think that this is an example of a lack of everyone being on the same page as well. Romney tracks that run that gets passed in behind, and one thing that was also obvious on the broadcast was Rodriguez lifts his hand up for an offside. If Rodriguez had stayed up and Romney had stayed up, maybe yeah, he would have caught the runner offside. But if Romney goes, the moment he sees Romney tracking that run, he has to go back too. And it all, like you said, happens a bit too late. And by the time the shot is on frame, Edwards is a meter or two away from the guy shooting. So yeah, you can't put any blame on this one either.
Yeah, they're just putting him in terrible positions. It's no doubt that they're going to concede these goals. And finally, the fifth one, the one that saw the fan exodus from the stadium. Again, it's the wingers that Kansas City have. We saw this in the first game too. In any case, we have our three defenders. More or less, everyone's marking a player. It's fine so far, but then there's no one covering the right wing. There's no one in that space. When the pass goes out, you see Buddha sprinting back trying to cover, like full speed. And props to Buddha for trying to get trying to get that recovery. That's his responsibility. He's doing well in that. But then he overruns because he's just going way too fast. Kansas City stopped the ball. They slow down the play, gives them space and time to set up the shot. And of course, I mean, when you give him time and space inside the box, that's going to be a goal at this level of play. And it's unfortunate that Earl Edwards didn't get there. But again, like to begin with, why is there so much space in the box?
Yeah, this is one goal where I question some of the substitutions from Bruce Arena. Personally, I don't think that just flooding the field with forwards is how you come back from a deficit. It kind of makes sense, when you first like intuitively, but I think it's moments like this, right? You give up so much when you just flood the field with forwards. That would have been Costa's man who scored the goal and who was substituted off for Buddha. And Buddha, understandably, because he's a forward, doesn't have the defensive IQ to recognize that danger. And it just ends up being a really easy goal. And like you said, by the time he sees Tommy, oh shoot, he's in this really dangerous position. He's wide open. It's too late. It's too late. And try as you might, it's not going to be enough. And yeah, just really ugly goals all around.
So yeah, hopefully this paints a little bit of a clearer picture. I think blaming this all on Earl Edwards Jr. is a bit harsh. Yes, I think there were at least 2 or 3 goals that he could have done better, and had Danny been playing, maybe 2 or 3 of those get saved. But again, there were just so many defensive mistakes, and in this game, particularly playing 3 in the back against wingers that are as talented as Kansas City's, it's going to be a tough day. And it's especially disappointing because Kansas City came in as like the second to worst team in the league. They've been struggling all season. They only had 1 win coming into this game. They had sacked Peter Vermees, their head coach, for many seasons, and they're in this transition period. And we're playing at home, and to go out like this it just stings. Luis, what are your takeaways from this game?
Yeah, I think actually we haven't talked about what we've done in the game. Obviously, we did score 3 goals, but even with that, I think that we underperformed. XG shows that we should have had 4 goals, and there were a few moments, right? I mentioned earlier this mass substitution by Bruce Arena that's put on Buddha, put on Judd, but you lose a lot of quality as well, right? There was a few times at the end of the game where a cross would come into the box and no one would get on the end of it. It was a bit kind of scrappy in the box, trying to put it up. And I feel like sometimes when you put on so many forwards, they just get in each other's way, and it doesn't really help you lead to a goal scoring opportunity. Again, some transition moments. Not all the goals that we conceded were transitional moments, but some of them were. I guess a lot of desynchronization from the Quakes, especially the back line, like we've talked about, right? With Rodriguez, with Costa, with Mark Anthony K, with Romney at times. And I think that's a big problem, and that's something that we have seen kind of consistently this season. And this is, of course, coming off the back of a team that has tried to make defensive solidity one of its strong points, given how poor we were in that aspect last season. With that being said, I do want to give some positives. Again, 3 goals. That is a lot of goals. 4 XG on the night. That is good performance, under good underlying numbers. I thought Niko Shakir's played really well. I thought he, was good on the ball. There's a few moments in the box where he weaved his way through a few players. I thought, Chicho again played good. Martinez good. They both got their goals. Leroux as well. I think he again showed there are a lot of moments watching the game where I was like, he's in a tight situation here, and he just finds a way to get out of it, to find a pass, to make the right touch in the right direction, and to find Espinoza. So I thought there were some good progressive things. We did see a debut again, Floriani. Congratulations to him for making his first MLS debut. But you just wish these good performances and good takeaways could happen with 3 points in a better context, right?
Yeah, definitely agree with all the positive takeaways. And to add on to that too, like you think about last year when we'd go down 2 goals, the game was done. It didn't matter what minute it was, the game was over, right? But now this year, we're down 3-0 at 25th minute. The boys still fight. They pull 2 back. And it was truly an exciting game. Like in the halftime, we thought, yeah, they can actually pull this off. This can be the first Goonies moment in many, many years. And in the second half too, like it just felt like the whole crowd was really behind the team. Every tackle, every good pass, every big moment, the whole crowd just felt electric, energetic. And it's been a while since I've felt that at PayPal Park, to be completely honest with you. And I do think it's also important to keep in mind that this wasn't our strongest starting 11. Every team has to deal with injuries, and we do too. Hernan has been out for multiple games now. That's one really big attacking piece. Bruno Wilson was injured for this game. That's why we saw Daniel Mooney start. And of course, Daniel being out, that's why Earl Edwards Jr. was playing. So it's important to keep that in mind too. Like you take your 3 back line, you place one of those players, you're going to feel the difference of that. And that could be experience, that can be communication, that can take shape in many different forms. So really hoping that Bruno Wilson can come back. And we saw Rodriguez come off against LAFC, which was also atypical. And when he got subbed off in this game, he ran straight to the locker room. And he did get stepped on at least once or twice in that game, right? So part of me also wonders, like, were these mistakes that we saw Rodriguez make that he doesn't regularly make, how much of that could have been that he was just playing with an injury because there were no other options? You look at the bench, yes, there's a lot of players that are listed as defenders, but for example, like Nick Lima is a fullback, and it just doesn't feel like we have center back depth. The only depth was Daniel Mooney, and if we have 2 injured center backs, that's going to be a problem. So I don't know, it's something to keep in mind. Next weekend, we're going to be playing against Columbus. That's going to be a really difficult game, especially on the road. So I'm just hoping that we can get as healthy of a squad that we can, because until then, this is going to be a problem.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Unfortunate, the injuries. Hopefully, they can come back soon. There's still a bit of uncertainty, I think. Not much communication on part of the organization, but hopefully, yeah, we can get Daniel back, Bruno back, and Hernan back too.
So yeah, only time will tell. Next weekend at Columbus. And yeah, whatever happens in that game, we'll be here to cover it. So thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you.